Welcome to the Whole Health Podcast,
where a functional nutritionist and a biological dentist investigate the interconnectedness of your health.
Let's get started. Welcome to the Whole Health Podcast, Martha. I'm going to read a little bit about you, and then we're going to dive in.
Okay? Fabulous.
Martha Wright is a New Orleans-born wine industry veteran turned sobriety mindful drinking coach, working in small groups and one-on-one in her own practice, Clear Power Coaching, as well as serving as a senior coach with The Naked Mind. Using her background as a winery owner and as a project manager for Food Network chefs, her unique path to giving alcohol the boot focuses on kicking up the lusciousness and fun in our lives. Plus, of course, understanding the neuroscience of habits, uncovering unconscious beliefs about alcohol, and honing coping tools. She splits her time between Paris, Portland, and New Orleans, where you can find her sleuthing out the best street food markets, coffee shops, and non-alcoholic venues, hosting NA meetups, running, or playing ping pong. Well, that does not sound bad, Martha. Thank you for being here.
I want to sign up for that.
Yeah, I know. Sounds like a good life.
So, as I heard, so you were formerly a winery owner. So, yeah. So,
Exactly.
Tell me about this path of how you became aligned with the sobriety movement.
It is a crazy trajectory for sure, and hopefully others can hear in this maybe a lot of hope, in that if I could do this, after being so thoroughly steeped in this world, in alcohol. And it really was both a great challenge and opportunity, but because of being so completely immersed in this world of alcohol, hospitality, I had so many fears about this. It was very much, my identity was wrapped up in alcohol, in wine, in all of that, all the aspects of hospitality. And I think the sentences in my head were along the lines of, life will have no sparkle. Things will be very gray. And so there also is a feeling of disloyalty to the industry. And so I really grappled with that. At the same time, I was having symptoms of just that my body was not processing alcohol the way it had. I was waking up every single night at 3 a.m. and not just waking up, but in this kind of worry spiral, beating up on myself. I felt like there were digestive issues. I had brain fog. I felt just in an overall sense that I was on a hamster wheel, and I would make middle of the night promises. I am not drinking tomorrow. And then, late afternoon, it's like a special form of amnesia. And I'm just, I've completely forgotten the middle of the night, kind of praying to some entity. And I'm pouring myself a glass, and it's always, I don't really have that much of a problem. This isn't that big a deal. I am in every other way. I'm so healthy, and life is together. There weren't wheels coming off the bus. And so I really think that's something that we don't talk about enough. Whenever this topic comes up, we immediately go to the stories of rock bottoms.
Yeah.
And so people who are in the middle can very often find themselves feeling stuck and continuing to ask this question, but it's really not that bad, is it? So it really was a process of questioning, going back and forth, not seeing the path, really seeing that all the kinds of answers were geared for rock bottoms. And since that's not where I felt, it was a matter of years of being in this pattern of questioning and trying certain things and it not really working. And that all changed when I got introduced to something that was a completely different path.
Okay, so tell us about that. What was the next step?
So I just, by chance, a neighbor mentioned to me a book and an author. It's This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. She had also come up with a program, The Alcohol Experiment. And I looked it up immediately. I got home and then just signed on and did a 30-day alcohol break. And what was so instantly appealing was that this was a neuroscience-based approach. And it was really all about asking questions. And it was about an experiment. And it's set up in a way that because this is an experiment, there's no failure. An experiment just means we're going to look and see. We're going to gather data. We're just going to try. And whatever happens, there's going to be information for us there. And I was learning so much, and so many things were clicking and connecting and being able to understand what the role of dopamine and the way that the brain's reward center is designed and the way it works in a healthy brain. This is exactly what happens in a healthy brain when a healthy brain encounters something that is highly addictive. And understanding that, those ideas and the physiology of it, does so much to just slay the shame and the stigma we've had in our culture for way too long, a just binary understanding of this. You're either a normal drinker or you're a problem drinker.
Yeah.
And that's just not the reality. It is a spectrum. And this approach allows you to really understand that and see it not as something about, I did something wrong, this is in my genes, I have an addictive personality, but this is how the brain responds. Dopamine's a learning chemical. And so this is about why did I not have the willpower? This is about what did my brain learn when I started to lean on this to relax, when I started to lean on it to be my way to have some me time or to kind of decompress at the end of the day, to help me sleep, whatever it is. It's really about what did the brain learn. And so all of this was fascinating to me, and fascination's really key. It's an animating emotion, and it's the polar opposite of feeling, just the negativity of this is a problem, I'm doing something wrong, I'm beating up on myself, and I'm feeling shame about it.
Absolutely. One of the things that I say in clinic a lot to patients is we're going to shift to curiosity and away from judgment, because in judgment, you can't even tell what's happening in your body. I need you to stay really curious right now so then you can report back to me. And that's what I always have loved about learning about your process is that curiosity, non-judgment driven experiment, right? It's so cool.
Exactly.
Okay, so tell us how that's shaped what you do now and how you're working with people.
So I am really working with gray area drinkers. And that is really the place to start in kind of understanding what does that mean. Again, we've had this formerly this understanding of, it's either one or the other, but really it's maybe 10% or less of regular drinkers that would be chemically addicted and would really need medical supervision to safely cut down their alcohol consumption. It might be about 10% of regular drinkers are truly in the category of take it or leave it. They drink a few times a year. It's just a non-issue. But that's a pretty small group of people, and that means they're 80% of us in this middle zone. And so that is who I work with. These are people that can stop, and they do stop here and there. They might have done a dry January. They might stop when they're put on an antibiotic. But they're not necessarily happy about it, and they would feel deprived. They notice that they feel deprived, a little grumpy about it, not happy if something gets in the way of that pattern and routine. And, that they would maybe put rules and boundaries around their drinking and then find that after a while it doesn't work. And they slip back into the pattern of drinking. And mainly they would report, that they're not having fun. And this is what I love. I love working with people that with the methodology that I use, the tactics and just the approach and mindset is helping people find a way that their alcohol-free life is juicy and not dry. I mean, who wants to be dry?
Good pun,
Yeah.
by the way.
Those are great words. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, like what happened with your winery?
So one of the things that I think people are attracted to what I'm doing is that I am not at all anti-alcohol. What I am is pro-options. And so I love just being part of and contributing to a conversation where we're thinking far more often about how can we increase the options that are available at any given event. And that years from now, that I think we will look back on some of the ways we organize things and think that was kind of crazy to have a baby shower and all be drinking champagne in front of the mother-to-be, who's the honoree, who cannot drink. And of course, it's not just about women, but just in any number of situations. Drinking, huge bar at a high school graduation event or whatever it is. And so when I think back on what we were doing in our winery tasting room, I felt like I was being gracious if I offered someone a glass of water. Now, by the time I noticed that I should offer them a glass of water, they had already had to be othered. They were already separated from the group and looked like they were a bit out of it. And that's the only way that I would have noticed. Now, that, looking back, that's not good enough. And that should never have been the case. If I were to do it again, we no longer have the tasting room in the winery. But I've spoken about this, publicly and written sort of public apologies. I really apologize to the non-drinker. I just didn't see you. And what could be offered that would be so lovely is a locally made kombucha or a shrub made from, fruit from the area. It can really still be something very local, something very artisanal, something thoughtful, something that still allows me as the producer to share a little bit of a story or to have you connect with the personality of my brand. And, just when we make those options available, it's amazing that people take them. And that option, again, should be very visible. It shouldn't require that someone has to ask. So I am someone that really encourages people to visit wine country here in Oregon, in other areas. These are just agricultural areas that have so much to offer. I am really big on, in our alcohol-free life, being able to embrace and double down on sensory experience. So a visit to wine country allows us the opportunity to go taste olive oil at, a winery that also happens to have an olive oil mill, to, walk through the lavender fields, to go ride an ATV through the vineyards or take a hot air balloon ride or go to a fabulous restaurant. There are wineries that have beautiful art collections, on and on. And so I love the idea that people can continue to support these places and businesses. And so, I think that it's still really about just offering more options. And in this way, what we're doing is we're building a better drinking culture.
Mm-hmm. Are you seeing farmers, wineries move in that direction where they are more open to offering something other than just their wine product?
Yes, definitely. And it's when they do, I am very excited to champion them and recommend them. And I think that those that are doing that are going to see the reward and the upside. That it makes it easier. I think what sometimes gets missed is that when you have that option available, it's not just that person that you're serving. It's not just the non-drinker. Everyone else in their party that they walked in with is happier. We want everyone in our gang to have their needs met. So it's really no different than if there's a vegetarian or a vegan option, and it just makes you happy. You're not happy until everyone in your group is happy. So I do think it's great that more and more wineries are seeing that is the way to extend radical hospitality is to really let your guests be seen in that way.
And we're seeing more restaurants doing that. But I think, it's a little bit of an easier offering at a restaurant versus a winery, of course. Okay, so because I'm going to be transparent here because I'm all about, transparency. So, I'm a 45-year-old woman. So yes, you drink alcohol, you are up in the middle of the night and you are pretty sure that the sky is falling and that you are never going to drink again, right? I've been there.
Yes.
Everything you said,
Yes.
I was like, I've been there, done that. And I work with women, right? So women somehow in, maybe it's the late 30s, maybe it doesn't hit you till the 40s. But for the most part, there's this divergence between men and women, and I have this with my husband, who is a wine importer. So it's always a very interesting conversation at home because he can drink, go to sleep the whole night, wake up, hit the sauna, go to yoga, have a complete day, be totally productive. If there's anything off, it doesn't look like any other day to me personally, right? But for me, it's like, well, that day's shot. And that's after 2 glasses maybe of wine, right? So tell me a little bit about your understanding around why that happens for women. What is it that makes us so uniquely sensitive and miserable when we consume alcohol in the middle of our life and beyond?
I appreciate that so much because I do hear that very often with the women that I'm working with is, my husband seems to be able to drink and his drinking is not the same as mine. I wish that I had learned when I was a teenager that to begin with, women have less of the enzyme ADH that breaks down and metabolizes alcohol.
Alcohol dehydrogenase, right?
Thank you.
Yes.
I rely on you.
Keep it scientific.
I think I know. I think I know that. Okay.
And that's really significant. Why do none of us know that?
Right.
So right off the bat, we have less of that enzyme that would break down alcohol, and then also because we have less muscle, we have less water. And so for men, if a female and a male of the exact same size and weight are drinking, the males, the alcohol is going to be more diluted throughout the body, and for women, more concentrated. So it's hitting our system harder in both of those ways, and so at lower drinking levels, women are more impacted, and their organs and all of their body is just impacted more by alcohol. I really wish that I'd known that years ago. And when I think of myself drinking and matching my husband glass for glass, which is completely normal, and by the way, that's what I saw everyone doing in amongst our customers all those years in the wine industry, and that's very natural. It's a gracious thing to do. You top, pour a little for you and pour mine, and so that was never a thought of mine. I do remember in my early 40s, even maybe mid 40s, noticing how much alcohol felt, different it felt. And I just didn't listen to that. And I do think that I would have if I had heard even one podcast like this. I mean, it would have made all the difference, because it would have just been reinforcing, okay, this isn't, Martha, this is not just your imagination. Someone else is saying this too. But I just waved it off. And I really did feel a shift where I said, it's not, something's shifting where it's not feeling like a buzz. I am just feeling dizzy. And, but I was like, I'm going to push through.
I will forge on.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and you're the expert and know then the impact of our hormones. And as we get to perimenopause and then menopause, what does the impact of our dropping hormones have on how we are able to metabolize alcohol, and then, how it's impacting our sleep and all of that. So that is something that I have loved about your work, is being able to really explain that well. So
there's an interesting trend, I would say, that I see in women around my age, where they've hit a phase of their life where they are maybe working, maybe they have kids that are middle school or high school age, maybe they've got parents that are struggling a little bit. They've been married for a half a second and they're like, oh, their stress is pretty high, right? And while that's happening, their cortisol levels are up, their progesterone, which is so stabilizing, is dropping because it's perimenopause and we're on the, highway to menopause at this point, going 85 miles an hour. And we're like, yeah, I want that drink, right? Because everything feels so out of balance that you're like, just numb it. I just need to bring it down. And what we're not learning, what we're not being told, is that that's dysregulating those hormones more and more and more. And so, yeah, in the moment, it's like you can whitewash your stress while you're drinking, but what it causes the next day is so much more dysregulation because your sleep is disrupted, your hormones are disrupted, and it's a vicious cycle. And man, I relate to that vicious cycle. I mean, yeah, you want something to bring it down, right? But what women seem to be talking about more, and they're searching people like you out because of this, is it's not working. Dang it, right? Like, why? Why is it not working? What is going to work for that true, to be stabilized in another way, to bring the nervous system down, to support hormones, to feel like we're more potent, more powerful, and not to completely, discount that men also have desires for sober curiosity and to be alcohol free, because that's, of course, that's the case. And there's many other things going on. So we should talk about that as well. But I definitely notice this conversation is happening with women in my age range right now.
Absolutely. And I love that. And this is a holistic approach. And so there are times when I am working with a client and they are gaining tools and tactics and really shifting their mindset around, okay, maybe this isn't all about what I'm giving up. Maybe when I say no to the drink, I'm saying yes to other things. These are sort of the kind of foundations of the work that I do. And so they're gaining confidence, they're making headway. But if I can see that there's still some underlying things around their sleep, their mood, I am going to refer them to you and to someone like you, because I want them to have the most support and to give their nervous system the support that it needs, because that is going to make the rest of it much, much easier. So it absolutely is a holistic approach.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So for how many years have you been doing this now?
So it's 5.5 years that I've been coaching, and it was just a little over 6 years ago that I gave up alcohol. And initially, I really thought of it as I knew when I did a break, the results were just astonishing. I couldn't believe how much better I felt. I was sleeping better. My skin looked better, energy, all some of these things that we hear. And it was the other things, the things I really like to talk about that my clients are noticing. My confidence was up. I was, whereas previously I had all these ideas, but I couldn't make things happen.
No
great idea, but no execution. So I was getting things done, and I had, more drive, all of that. And so at that point, the results were so good that I just thought, daily drinking is done. But we're still, at that point, we were still in the wine business, importing wines. And I just said, I will drink once in a blue moon. If I'm in a producer's cellar in France and they say, this is my grandfather's wine, this vintage. And that's what I thought, is that I will be a once in a blue moon drinker. And I tried that a couple times and was mindful about it. And it's very personal. It's just individual. But what I realized was that wasn't, as I had gained confidence in being in social situations and exploring and celebrating without alcohol, and I didn't see the benefit in it anymore, that idea of drinking once in a while lost its appeal. And so I guess that's a great segue into kind of talking about one of the really big differences about this approach is that one of the things that we're doing in this approach is to really poke holes in the underlying beliefs about the benefits of alcohol. And so we all have these beliefs that alcohol relaxes me, alcohol's how I let my hair down, alcohol's my, release valve, or is how I bond, helps me sleep, on and on. And our brain is fabulous at cherry picking evidence to support those old beliefs.
Bias, yes.
And so we're really good at that. So when I'm working with a client, I'm going to help them with some real strategies to just illuminate the examples and evidence that we already have in our brains that contradicts those beliefs. And then I'm going to help my clients set up some fun experiments where they can gather new evidence that, again, contradicts those beliefs. So as we successfully poke holes in those old beliefs, they stop, holding water. They're collapsing. And what is, I hope any listener, what is so hopeful about this is that when we're successful at poking holes in all those beliefs, there's no longer desire. So this becomes something where this is not about willpower at all. No willpower is required. When the belief of the benefit is gone, there just is no desire, and no willpower at all is required.
Which is very reassuring, since you can only last in willpower for so long, right?
It's so liberating. Yes, that willpower is just a finite resource, and it gives out, even each and every day. There's only so much of it that we have.
Right.
So,
yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, if somebody is listening to this, I'm listening to this. I'm having all sorts of thoughts in my head. So somebody's listening to this and maybe curious about next steps, or they're curious about how they can start this exploration or this experiment. What would you advise them? What are your tips? What are next steps?
I would definitely say start by asking questions. You already brought that up, the idea of curiosity. This whole approach is rooted in curiosity. And what we tend to do is we're asking the wrong questions. We're asking questions like, do I have a problem? Am I an alcoholic? Is my drinking really that much worse than anyone else's? That's what I was always asking. I'm not sure. I don't think I'm drinking any more than anyone else in the wine industry. And that question wasn't getting me very far. But to ask a different question and just to say, how do I feel? And how do I feel? To really put the emphasis on that. Would I maybe feel better with a little less or none? I also think that we're often asking a question of, but won't I be missing out? And that was very primary for me. And again, that's a little trick of the brain, because there is another way of looking at it to say, maybe with my drinking, I'm missing out. That is something we never ask. The focus is always on what am I missing? If what would I be missing if I'm not drinking? But the truth is, I had a client who went to a wedding, her first wedding, alcohol-free, and the next day she was comparing notes with the rest of her party who had all been drinking. And
that's always fun.
And yes, what a great shift. She said, wasn't that cool that the bride and groom left on a speedboat? Everyone else said, what? And it was such a great way to realize that they were all by the bar, like moths to a flame. And they had missed this whole cool, escape by the bride and groom. So it's really asking a different question. It's one of my favorite tactics, something that I share with clients is, if we're not happy with the result that we're getting, feed the brain a different question. Our brain is such a creative, problem-solving machine. So just feed it a new question. And that question might be something like, might I feel a little better? Might there be another possibility that it's not going to feel like deprivation? Might it be that my life could feel like more without this?
I have to tell you a funny anecdote, which I sort of started to share with you before we started recording, that my husband's having this get together just tonight, right? And normally I would feel this obligation that I have to be there and I have to be part of it. It has nothing to do with me, but that I need to be there, right? Because I'm married to him. And it's a larger gathering for my general social anxiety level. And so I thought, okay, well, if I go, I have to drink. And I don't drink very often anymore, but I thought the only way I'm going to get through this many people, because I'm a little overwhelmed with my normal life tasks right now, the only way I'm going to get through that experience is if I drink alcohol. And I had this whole week-long thought experiment. What is this weekend going to look like? Well, if I do drink, I won't finish building the greenhouse tomorrow, and I won't take the horses trail riding, but I'll drink, but I'll hang out with him. Well, and then I had to pro and con this entire thing and say, how do I really want this to look? And at the end of the day, the conversation with myself came down to, that environment doesn't serve me today. It might another day, but today it's not going to serve me, so I'm not going to partake. But then I'll get to finish the greenhouse, right? But it took so much presence and mindfulness for me to just pro and con that entire thing. But that's because historically I wouldn't put much thought into it, right? It would just be, well, that's the obligation. I'm going to go. I'm going to get through it, and then I'm going to miss out on building the greenhouse. And I feel like if this is your pattern, if this is your habit, if it's a part of your life, it takes rewiring. You really have to give space for your brain to consider all of the options, not just the default mode.
I love that that option is there where you're saying it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And so that also, while I was very clear and shared that I decided in the end that it was easier and I felt more freedom by just not drinking at all, that doesn't have to be the case for everyone. It is absolutely, it's a great place. And that's what this methodology is really all about, is that we really don't say never. And that is so freeing and opens up so much, because naturally for our human brain, when we say this is forever and I can never do this, that is very restrictive and we just kind of shut down. And what if it's really, I can drink whenever I want? I haven't felt like I wanted to. I was so successful in reclaiming spaces where I used to drink, in learning how in learning and kind of poking holes in this idea that alcohol helps me relax, or that alcohol is a great social lubricant. If I have successfully shown my brain otherwise, then I can really just be confident in saying, I can drink when I want. I just have learned that I feel better if I don't.
Yeah.
So I love that openness, because that is really key to this.
One of the things I recommend to my patients all the time is your website. And that's because it has a lot of resources. And some of those resources are just amazing NA beverages, right? You have become kind of the procurer of awesome drinks that don't have alcohol in them. So share your website, tell people how they can work with you, how they can find all of the knowledge you've culminated for them.
Fabulous. You can find me on my website at clearpowercoaching.com. And I appreciate that, Megan, because I do put a lot of time into the resources, tons of free resources with, my favorite books on this topic, articles, podcast interviews, and then my favorite NA beverages. And because of my background with food and with wine, it was something that was really important to me. And someone said something that really stuck with me, and that was, your way in is your way out. And my way into the wine industry was really not as much about the wine. It was all about the people and these fabulous producers and their stories and their history. And I didn't want to lose that. I decided to double down on it. And so what I found was that the producers making these NA beverages around the country, 6 years ago, there were very few. And I reached out to each of them personally, and it's such a new space that these people were generous to hop on a call with me and exchange ideas, and I meet up with them and have become friends with many of these people. And what I found is they are dynamic, interesting, passionate, have a great backstory. So all of these elements from the wine industry that I loved, I've now found in the NA sphere. So it's exciting that this exists. And again, back to that idea of options. The options have just exploded, and they're getting better and better. Mm-hmm. And it really is a game changer, because what it allows us to do is stay in the ritual. Ritual is so important for humans. And because of these beverages and these pioneers, they have created a new category. This category didn't even exist. It's not like, someone coming along and just improving an existing category.
Yeah.
This is kind of wild, wild west for them. It's a lot of work. It's taking a lot of capital. The systems of distribution and all of that was not set up for them. It was set up for alcohol. So there's a lot to figure out. We can all have patience with these producers, buy their products, support them, and then experiment, have fun. If you want to, have some friends over and do a tasting, and you'll just be surprised how much people will take you up on that and enjoy it. And the best compliment that I can get is when I share an NA beverage and someone who's a very regular drinker can take a sip and say, "Oh, I would drink this," and that's a big deal. If you can get someone who is where I was, where I'm drinking wine every single night, and if you can get that person to say, "Actually, this feels doable." So that's what's happening with these NA beverages, is it's feeling, suddenly like, oh, here's a viable option.
Awesome.
Amazing.
So it's kind of a wrap up to today's conversation, which I've loved. It's the Whole Health Podcast. Would you share with us maybe some advice to our listeners, or kind of around the idea of what does whole health mean to you?
Okay, I think that means really asking ourselves, what do I need right now? And I think that gets back to this kind of mindful piece that we've been talking about. Tuning back into that intuition and in asking, what do I need right now? Sometimes that might be comfort. I think when we think about, that idea, we're thinking of self-care and comfort, but self-care can just as often mean stimulation or adventure or discovery. So I think that is what it means to me, is asking that question and knowing that might mean going to have an adventure or going to play ping pong.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Well, thank you so much, Martha, for joining us. I love what you're about, what you're sharing, what you're bringing to our community, and I love to see that it's growing. And I love your point of like support these makers. That's how they're going to grow. I've certainly seen it in like the NA beer category, like this. Everybody under the sun now, it seems like Corona and all these other brands that now have NA. So it's out there, and more is coming. So this has been great. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for being here. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Whole Health Podcast.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, please follow us on social media and wherever you listen to podcasts.
You can find out more about us at thewholehealthpodcast.com.
You can find me on my website, blodgettdentalcare.com.
And you can find me at bioloungepdx.com or learn more about my organic soluble fiber supplement, Fluorosophy, at thinkfluorosophy.com.
We look forward to seeing you next time.